Okay, looks like we are live. Let me issue and control a nation's money supply, and I care not who writes the laws. This is the famous Rothschild quote from Meyer Anschel Rothschild from many hundreds of years ago. And look, now the Federal Reserve, according to Bloomberg, is the world's largest investor, and that is without an audit. So according to Bloomberg recently, the Fed now owns the Federal Reserve Bank now owns a total of 22,913 different securities. Insane. Now, most of those are bonds, but the Fed now also owns a lot of mortgages. So the data that has been coming out about how many mortgages in the United States the Federal Reserve owns is astronomical. So since this is the Bloomberg article that you can see there on the bottom of your screen, the Federal Reserve has snapped up $1 trillion in mortgage bonds since March, a record pace of purchasing as the U.S. central bank tries to blunt the impact of the global pandemic recession on American homeowners. The Fed bought around $300 billion of the bonds in each of the months of March and April, and since then has been buying about $100 billion a month after March and April. It now owns almost a third of bonds backed by home loans in the U.S. Buying the securities has pushed mortgage rates lower, with the average 30-year rate falling to 2.91% as of last week from 3.3% in early February. George Gammon and I have both talked about this. This is a scam with property taxes. However, a lot of people are fleeing the cities, a lot of major metro areas, and there is an increase in home builds, but it's very dispersed. The DC metro area, there is nonstop home building around here. Construction cranes. My best friend works for a real estate agent, and her husband just raised $10 million during the financial crisis in the last 7 or 8 months, to build new expensive single-family homes in this DC metro area. So crazy stuff that is happening right now, but the Fed is buying up lots of these things nonstop. And the Rothschild quote is applying. The Fed is crowding out the private sector. And on top of this, you have real estate rental property investors, it looks like, getting screwed. Now, I wrote an article for patrons, I think it was last week, predicting that this would happen. President Trump talked about that this would happen, but the CDC has issued a federal eviction moratorium through the end of the year. This is going to potentially drastically hurt rental property investors. So anyone that was relying on rental property income will now be stuck paying the mortgage themselves if they want to hold on to the property. What a mess. Again, this is with all the crazy rules changes, the government and central bank and politicians and bureaucrats are pulling all these different levers, and there's going to be crazy amounts of distortions. People were messaging me on Patreon asking, why don't you like rental properties anymore? And I was telling them a couple weeks ago, because something like this could happen where the government just decides by a fiat, by a command, that people don't have to pay rent, and then you can't evict them. And if you're a rental property owner, you are SOL, shit out of luck. Now, maybe you can challenge this in courts. I don't know all the rental property laws, and they're different for each city and state and county, but it's just sad. Unfortunately, it is the new normal until the economy gets back to producing normal levels of cash flow. Okay, this is just going to be a very, very short show. The last live stream show that was over 30 minutes, I had a 5-hour, very painful migraine after that. So I can't really be doing long shows too much anymore till I figure out exactly how to fix the health problems I have. I'm not doing a 30 or 40 minute with $2 super chats where people ask questions that hedge fund managers can't even answer after weeks of preparation for a 5-hour migraine where I have to lie down after that for a 30-minute free show. And then YouTube's going to take all my ad revenue. My patrons will get my best work, and they are getting my best work. I spent over 2 hours yesterday writing an extensive article on hidden optionality for silver mines. So these are the top shelf silver projects that, had the silver price not been smashed down in 2011, had all those crazy paper price manipulation games not happened and the silver price not crashed in 2011, these mines would have been developed. One of them is arguably the largest undeveloped silver mine in the world. So that is behind the paywall for my patrons. If you are a patron, if you aren't one of the 60 people who just canceled in the last week because I took 5 days off, I think, from doing free content, my patrons still got plenty of articles. They got 2 full articles last week and plenty the week before, so they're still getting tons and tons of content. But if you're sticking with me, the patrons are getting rewarded with lots of good content beyond the paywall. So the Fed, Mish put out this article too. Fed's balance sheet is ballooning out of control. Here's the thing though, the Fed's official balance sheet actually hasn't grown really at all since the end of May. So the Fed is just changing what they own on the balance sheet. They're trying to prop up the housing market from what it looks like with their purchases. So they're focusing on the treasury market. They're focusing on the housing market. But this is really why we need an audit. So we need to go in there and we need to understand exactly what corporate bonds the Fed is buying. There's no way the Fed is, their official balance sheet's only 6.9 trillion. There's absolutely no way. Anyone who believes that also still believes in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy. Anyone who believes that there is negative inflation in the European Union still believes in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy. Anyone who believes that their bills are not going up still believes in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy. Okay, Lacy Hunt is not making millions of dollars per year as a bond fund trader because of deflation. He is making millions of dollars per year as a bond fund manager because he is front-running the central banks. It is corruption, pure and simple. He's going to do all these stupid interviews on Macro Voices and elsewhere. He's a hardcore Keynesian. He will find the straw of deflation in the inflation haystack. Okay, he will ignore all the corruption. If this is what money managers are doing, it's easy money. They know the central banks are going to buy the bonds. And they know the central banks are going to lie about it. Someone says, leave the Tooth Fairy out of it. Well, that's my new little joke there. If you believe the government economic data, you still believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy. Unfortunately, that's the truth. That's how divorced from reality the government economic data is getting. Okay, let me finish the Mish article here. As of August 26, 2020, Fed's balance sheet nearly $7 trillion, which I don't believe. I think their real balance sheet is well over $10 trillion already, of which $3.7 trillion are notes or bonds, nearly $2 trillion in mortgages, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae. No end in sight to Fed's mortgage buying spree. The Fed has snapped up $1 trillion in mortgage bonds since March. It bought around $300 billion. Okay, that's just copying the Bloomberg article. Just before this latest round, principal payments from its mortgage bond holdings have whittled that down to 21%. So Morgan Stanley analysts pointed out that in late March that the buying was running at 8 times the pace seen in prior episodes of Fed purchasing under programs known as quantitative easing. Buying the securities has pushed mortgage rates lower. Just before this latest round of Fed buying mortgages, principal payments from its mortgage bond holdings had whittled that down to 21%. Okay, but it has now increased back to 30%. The Fed maintains its current buying pace. It will again own 34% of the mortgage universe by the end of the year, by the end of 2020. The Fed also has to monetize an enormous budget deficit. The U.S. federal government is projected to run over a $3.3 trillion budget deficit by the Congressional Budget Office. But apparently there is no inflation, even though in the government's own data, we're starting to see stagflation in grocery store prices, food prices, and healthcare prices. But the deflationists just ignore all of that. I think the deflationists are making so much money, they don't pay their own bills. I think that's the case. Okay, we have super chats here from Ike. Thank you for the $2 super chat. He's saying going long VIX. I haven't looked at what the out of the money VIX call options are or the leaps. The time to have bought those, in hindsight, obviously, was when the VIX was falling, to be contrarian. That was the time to buy those. Now, the Fed tried to calm things down, and they did calm things down for a while. The stock market's looking ridiculous here. Let me just pull it up. We have the Dow futures over 29,000 again. It's as if February and March never happened. The real economy is absolutely horrible. There's girls on dating apps that can't pay their phone bills. But don't worry, stocks are going up. So going long VIX, you're probably going to be paying a high price now for the call options on VIX. The time to buy those is to be contrarian. So when something's going down, the contrarian position is that there's going to be a mean reversion or reversal in the trade. When something's going up, the contrarian trade is to buy out of the money puts or a long straddle play. So volatility hedging trades where you have a hedged short. Unlike some of those Tesla guys who were so much hubris, so much overconfidence that Tesla. I interviewed Mark B. Spiegel, I think 3 years ago, and he was adamant that Tesla was going to be bankrupt already. And he's a hedge fund manager. This interview, I didn't get to talk about this on the recording because I just asked him, I said, you're a hedge fund manager. Do you have your Tesla shorts hedged? I said, do you have any call options? A part of your portfolio with Tesla call options to hedge your shorts? He's like, no. It was just overconfidence. He's like, they're going to be bankrupt soon. I'm not worried. So we have a bunch of hedge fund managers that are unhedged. But don't worry, a lot of them are going to get bailouts. And then both houses of Congress are just going to lie about it. Heck, you got even Paul Ryan now. He started a special purpose acquisition company, a SPAC. Even Paul Ryan is copying his former buddy, Mittens Romney. You got politicians now starting SPACs. These are special purpose acquisition vehicles. They're gonna try to buy up assets for pennies on the dollar now, like corporate raiders, like private equity guys. And then they're gonna try to, if the stock market doesn't crash soon, they're gonna buy up all these assets, and then they're gonna create a really gobbledygook company, like a diversified company. And they're going to say, oh, this company is undervalued, and oh, this company has so much growth, and oh, this company is going to pay a dividend soon. And then they're going to dump it on retail shareholders. And then when the stock market crashes, that thing's going to crash. But all of the insiders like Paul Ryan and Mittens Romney and all these other, I'm sure there's lots of Democrats doing this too, limousine liberals and champagne socialists, they're going to be rich because they already cashed out. Welcome to dystopia. So the Fed is now the world's largest investor, according to Bloomberg, and we haven't even gotten a Fed audit yet. We really need an audit, folks. Ron Paul wrote an op-ed in the last couple months saying that the Fed's individual corporate bond purchases, he thinks there's been trillions more of corporate bond purchases by the Fed. Why is the Fed buying bonds for Apple? Apple, according to their balance sheet, doesn't need the Fed to buy their bonds. Apple has plenty of cash, although who knows about their sales now. So I will attach a link to the CDC announcement about how the eviction has been postponed. Evictions have been postponed till the end of the year. Who knows what's going to happen? It's really sucks for rental property investors. I'm friends with a lot of them. Some of them are in total denial. Some of them say, oh, there's going to be lots of millennials and Generation Z people buying houses, so it's not a big deal. But when you're a rental property investor, you're renting for cash flow, and you need someone else to pay your mortgage and your property taxes. So I don't know how it's going to work out for them. And then I'll put a link to the Ron Paul op-ed about how he thinks there's been, it's on the Ron Paul Institute website, if I forget, which is unfortunately happening a lot more nowadays. It's on the Ron Paul Institute website from a couple months ago, where he wrote that he thinks the Fed has been buying trillions and trillions more of individual corporate bonds than they're claiming, and that we need to audit them. So in wrapping things up here, the Fed is now the largest investor on the planet, and the Rothschild quote, and government and central banks together are crowding out the private sector more. This is fascism, folks. I know people don't like to call it that, but this is the merger of state and corporate interests. And the central banks, the cartel, are funding it. Anyways, if you want to check out my Patreon, there is still over 1,000 people chipping in per month, $5 a month. There's a lot of content behind the paywall. There is over 100 pieces of unique content. It might be over 120. I spent over 2 hours yesterday on an extensive article for optionality for silver miners yesterday, going through some of the silver deposits that could come online at current silver prices that could be fast-tracked, including arguably the world's largest undeveloped silver project, which has over 600 million ounces of silver measured in indicated resource, with more drilling and more exploration drilling proving it out. It could be even more than that. So if you want to take a look there, it's only $5 a month. In the future, maybe the price goes up a little bit because everyone's getting killed with inflation. Now everyone's bills are going up. So maybe the price will go up to $6 or $7 a month. At the beginning of next year, we'll see. But there is a lot of content behind the paywall there. I try to do at least one good article per week. Sometimes there's more than that. Sometimes there's a lot more. Unfortunately, it's been depending upon how I feel. And since March, things have not been very good. They've been getting progressively worse. I'm doing the best I can, but the reality of this situation is just not good.